Okay, today is Beis Kislev. It is the yahrzeit of Rabbi Aaron Kotler Zatzal and of the Meshkiach of Nosson Wachtfeugel. I just want to share a quick story with Rabbi Aaron Kotler. There was Rabbi Aaron Kotler used to Rabbi Aaron Kotler's yahrzeit. So Rabbi Aaron Kotler used to be in yeshiva only on Shabbos, and the whole week he lived in Brooklyn. His wife lived in Brooklyn, and he would travel back and forth. Rabbi Aaron Kotler. So Shir was only on Shabbos because the rest of the week he was traveling, trying to raise money for the yeshiva. So he gave Shir on Shabbos. So there were once two Bochum that decided they wanted to go to the Rebbe in Williamsburg. They wanted to go to the Satmar Rebbe for Shabbos. This story was told to me by Mr. Arnold, who was there. So two Bochum wanted to go to the Satmar Rebbe for Shabbos. So they missed Shabbos. They came back to yeshiva on Motzei Shabbos, and Rabbi Aaron made a beeline straight over to them and said, "Wo sind Sie gewesen? You were missing by the Shir." So they told him, "We went to the Rebbe in Williamsburg for Shabbos. We wanted to go to the Rebbe in Williamsburg to see how it is for Shabbos." But in truth, they told Rabbi Aaron it was a complete and total waste of time. We would have been much better off staying here in Lakewood and coming to Shir. So Bar said it's impossible. If someone went to the Satmar Rebbe for Shabbos, it's impossible that you went for nothing and you didn't have a great benefit. Tell me over exactly what happened during your experience there, during your stay there, and I'm going to show you that you had a great benefit by none other than the Satmar Rebbe. So they said, okay, we went into Tish, and the Rebbe makes Kiddush, and they passed the Becha around. And then the Rebbe washed, and they have Chal and they passed Chal around. And then the Rebbe ate fish, and they passed fish around. Now, it wasn't geschmack seeing the fish pass from hand to hand to hand to hand till it got to us. So we really didn't want to eat it. It was like a little nauseating for us. But the Rebbe, it was a smaller oilam then, and the Rebbe was looking at us because, we wanted to be Makar of us. And we had that fish in our hand. What were we supposed to do? So we acted like the Malachim who were Avram's guest. We made believe like we were putting it in our mouth, and we let it fall to the floor. So it looked like we were eating it, but in fact, we didn't put it into our mouth. So after Tish, we went around to say the Shabbos to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe looked at us and says, ich sei, ihr zwei, elen keimel nicht werden Chasidim. I see you two will never become Chasidim. So Rabbi said, you see, you got a good bracha. You got the best bracha you could possibly get. So how could you say that you didn't benefit by being by the Satmar Rebbe for Shabbos? Okay. The second thing is, on the way over here today, I was listening to 680 News, and I heard the newscaster, I don't know how he knew this, but he supposedly when Justin Trudeau met Trump, and Trump said, we're putting these big tariffs on you, Justin said, well, that will destroy our country. He said, no problem. We can absorb you. You'll just become part of the United States.
Wait.
So that's all I heard.
No. And then he said, you can be governor. Ken will be the 51st state, and you'll be the governor.
And what I like about it, because now I know what Donald Trump was doing with the oil. Because Lubavitch does that too. They take shuls that are on the decline and they take them over. So that's what Lubavitch ever told him. That's how it works. You want another state? All you need to do is shut down Canada, and then they can become your 51st state.
President for what? So much power.
For me, it would be geschmack if that happened. I wouldn't have to pay tax in two countries.
Yesterday, he already put out there that it's on January 20th is the day he's lifting. Those houses aren't released.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
Finally.
So we learned about a get mekusher and a get pashut yesterday, and we learned about where you sign. Being that it's a very small daf today, I want to go back to the beginning of the sugya that discusses the placement of the signatures on the get. So just to remind everybody, I'm so proud of my show and tell. This is what a get mekusher looks like. You write on the first line, and then you fold it over the second line, which is left blank. You write on the third line, you fold it over the fourth line, which is left blank. You write on the third line, which is then folded over on the fourth line, which is left blank. The rest of the star, which would be the typhus, is left flat. And sometimes we'll see where a kol shrir v'kayim, we looked yesterday, that a kol shrir v'kayim is basically saying this is the end of the star. There's nothing else to see over here. So let's have a look inside the Gemara on Daf Kuf Samach Amud Beis, where the Gemara asks, it's about halfway down, maybe the third down. The Gemara asks, Heichon Eidim Choshman. Where exactly on the star, the Get Kusher, are the Eidim going to sign? So Rav Huna Amar Ben Kesher LaKesher. And if you remember yesterday, the Havamina of the Gemara was that Ben Kesher LaKesher would be in the blank line in between each of the written lines, but it would be on the front face of the Get Mekusher. That's not the Maskana, but that's what the Gemara begins with. Rabbi Yirmiyah Be'Abba Amar Acharei Eksav, on the back side of the star, Ucheneged Eksav. So the first line is written, that's where an Eid would sign, the third line and the fifth line. But Mibechutz on the back side of the star. Amalei Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asked the following question of Rav Chisda. Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, the Amar Ben Kesher LaKesher, and Kasol Kadaitin Ben Kesher LaKesher Mikavoi, that he signs on the front face of the star, it doesn't make sense to say that because of a story. A Get Mekusher came to Rebbe. And just to remind ourselves, a Get Mekusher is sewn down. It's sewn down on the front face side, but on the back, it still looks like an open accordion. But on the front, it's completely sealed. So Vahu Mekusher the Ka'asala Kamei de Rebbe, V'Yomer Rebbe, Ein Zman Bozer. I don't see the date on this star. This cannot possibly be a valid star. Amar Le Rab Shimon beRebbe LeRebbe. So Rab Shimon, the son of Rebbe, told Rebbe, Shema ben Kshar of Muvla. And maybe the reason why you can't see the date is because it's sewn down. But if you open it up and look inside, you'll find, in fact, that there's a date there. So that's exactly what they did. Halya, they opened it up, V'chazya, and they saw the date. Practically, Gemara, why was Rebbe only concerned about the date? Why wasn't he concerned about finding the Eidim? The Meisa, if you hold that the Eidim sign on the front side of the get, which would also have been sealed down, so Rebbe wouldn't have seen Eidim either, well then, Ein Zman Bozeh, the Ein Eidim Bozeh Miboile. Rebbe should have also been concerned, not only is there no date on this get, there are no Eidim on this get. So because of that, Reb Chisda told Rami Bar Chama, Amar Le Misavers Ben Kesher LaKesher Migavoi, don't think that what Rav Huna meant, that you sign in between each line on the inside of the get, Loi Ben Kesher LaKesher Me'avroi. And therefore, even though the get was sewn together, on the backside there was an open accordion, and in fact, the Rebbe would have seen the Eidim, and therefore he only questioned the date. Frak the Gemara, with a get in such a configuration, there's no end to the get because the signature is in the back. See, in a normal star where the Eidim sign right beneath the writing on the star, it's very hard to add any text into the star because the Eidim are there. But if you're going to tell me that the signature on the back, that means the front of the star, you can add anything you would want to it, which would jeopardize the person who was being not harmed, but who's being liable in the star. So let's say if the Malva is holding the star and he could add lines to it, it might hurt the loiva because he might write in that the loiva owes him another money. Or if it's a star mechir, he can write, then there's another property that's recorded in this star. So the Gemara has solutions. So v'neichesh dil mezayev because of my the boy, maybe he added more into the star. V'chasimi sahadi, and the Eidim are signed over there because they're signed on the back. So it would all be validated by their chasim on the back. And for the Gemara, similar to what Duvi is saying, the Ksiv Beishrir V'Kayim, they did write a text at the bottom of the get to show that this is the end. So anything that you'll add below here is not part of the star, which is basically what you're saying. Frank the Gemara. But the Nechesh Doma Kosav My Deboy, what are you going to do? Is after the Akol Shrir V'Kayim, they wrote another paragraph, the Hadar Kosav Shrir V'Kayim Achrina, and they wrote another Shrir V'Kayim to validate what was written above that. Zok Gemara, that would be obvious that it's fraud because Chad Shrir V'Kayim Kazvinon. Today, Shrir V'Kayim like Kasvinon. We never have two Shrir V'Kayims. We never have two ends to a star. There's only one end to a star. So that's something we don't need to be worried about. That'll show us that it's fake on its face. But V'leichesh Dilma Mochit Leila Shrir V'Kayim. What stops him from erasing the Akol Shrir V'Kayim and adding to it? The Chosav Madaboy, the Hadar Kosav Shrir V'Kayim, and then he can add another Shrir V'Kayim, and he can add who knows what into that star. Zok Gemara Ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Tuluya Mikuyemes Kshera. What if in the text of the star, the Sefer realized that he made a mistake? So because of that, in the small margin between the two lines, he added something, or he did a cross out. That works if when you write a Kol Shir V'Kayim, you write, there was a correction on line 6, HaKol Shir V'Kayim. So before you write a Kol Shir V'Kayim, you actually refer to specific areas in the star that a correction was made, and that also gets validated by the Kol Shir V'Kayim. Similar to when you adjust a check, you initial at the point where you corrected a check. So Tluya Mekuyemes Ksera, there it will work. However, Mechek Posel, if there's something that's erased on the star, then it will be Posel. V'afal pi shemekuyam, even though it says later on Hakol Shrir V'Kayim, including that area above that was erased. What does this mean? But Amru Mechek Posel, where is it possible? Because we said earlier Mechek is good if you made a correction. So where is Mechek Posel? El b'makom Shrir V'Kayim. Normally, the end of the star says V'kanina b'mana dekasher l'miknevei. We made a kinyan about whatever is discussed in the star with a proper kinyan. Hakol Shrir V'Kayim. So when you read the star, you know that where would it have said Hakol Shrir V'Kayim right after the clause b'mana dekasher l'miknevei. But if you read the star b'mana dekasher l'miknevei and then you see something that was erased and written over, and then later on it says again b'mana dekasher l'miknevei Hakol Shrir V'Kayim, that's obvious that was someone who tried to erase that Kol Shrir V'Kayim. So Amr Mechek Posel El b'makom Shrir V'Kayim, only if the area that was erased was the area that we know surely would have had Shrir V'Kayim in it, and Uchashir Shrir V'Kayim. That's only if the amount that was erased would have taken up the space of Shrir V'Kayim, so it's obvious to us that it's that clause that was erased. There it wouldn't work. So therefore, your question that you asked a moment ago, Rabbi Bachama, what are you going to do if he erases Shrir V'Kayim and tries to write another one? That won't work because we will be able to tell exactly what he did. Let's see the Rashbam inside. Mechek Posel. Af ma shagia alov. Even what you wrote over the little patch that you had erased, because you could tell when someone erases a star. Af al pi shemekuyim. Even though at the bottom, by the second Shrir V'Kayim, it says, and that little erase over there that we corrected is also Shrir V'Kayim, that wouldn't help to validate that star. That area, that patch that was erased, the place where we say you cannot fix it any way if it was erased, that's the place where it would have made sense that it was written over there, Shrir V'Kayim. Where would that place be? Basra, after the clause, b'mana dekasher l'miknevei. That's normally where it would say Hakol Shrir V'Kayim, and now you see an erase mark with something else written in it. Umachkai v'yigia masharatza, and he added something else into this star. The achakach kosav a second time Shrir V'Kayim. So there, that mechek, whatever was written there, is rejected. But if there's a correction made somewhere in the middle of the ksav that's not in the place of Shrir V'Kayim, there we would assume that it was a valid correction. It would be obvious that long before they got to the end of the star, where they wrote Hakol Shrir V'Kayim the first time, a mistake was made. It was corrected. That you could do. So you can correct a mistake in the star, but you cannot play with the words Hakol Shrir V'Kayim. If you've erased more than that, then surely there's concern of what else he might have written there. Okay. Zok to Gemara Vayter. So that takes care of Rav Huna. Rav Huna's fail-safe way of protecting a star from fraud is by writing at the end of it Hakol Shrir V'Kayim, and that was basically Duvi's Eitzah. you're coloring in the margins. You're not leaving us any opportunity for fraud. But and it's me b'chutz. Why aren't we worried about the same thing? Why aren't we concerned that on the inside a person will write and add and modify anything that he wants, and then just sliding into the back? Oh, he doesn't say anything, doesn't add anything. Now this line is what the Bach is talking about. There are some who are not gurish umachtim sadisei mervoi. Rather, imagine this is our get mekusher, right? So behind here there was a signature, behind here there was a signature, and behind here there was a signature. Now there are no more signatures, right? So what stops him from adding a whole bunch of stuff here? There is no chol shvur v'kai. What stops the holder of the star from writing a whole? No, he'll write it on the inside, and on the outside, the Edom signed over there. This is the same question we're sort of asking on Rafuna, but now we're seeing how it applies to Rabbi Yirmiyah. So again, what stops somebody from adding text to the front of this star after he has three signatures? Now, the whole point is, why is Rabbi Yirmiyah different? Because Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that every line that has text on it has to have an eight signed on the back. Rav Huna's original pshat was you just sign on the back. But Rabbi Yirmiyah's point was kineged aksav. Wherever there's ksav, there has to be a signature. So on the first three lines, we know there has to be a minimum of 3 lines because you need a minimum of 3 edim for getting the kosher. Those you have signed. But let's be choshed that it'll add lines, and depending on the girsa in our Gemara, either it'll add lines and it'll add additional edim signing on the back of each of those additional lines, or he won't add. How does he expect to validate the star if there's no edim signed on the back? That's what we will see in the Rashbam. So he will add as many lines as he wants on the front face of the star, and and he'll just, for every line that he added, he'll get another aid to sign on. The Omar, and he'll say, avdi. So really there's 2 ways to read this, and we'll see that inside of the Rashbam. Either he got more edim, or we'll say he doesn't have more edim, and he'll say, I was going to get more edim, I just didn't get around to it yet. So again, there's an opportunity for fraud. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. Nechush, Dilma, Zayif, Uksiv, Mai deboy megavoy b'soif hashtar. He might write on the front face of the star whatever he would want to add. And even though there are no edim on the back side of those extra lines that he added, and he'll say, Lo yinachti zeh hachelek mi b'chutz. The only reason why I added lines that there's no edim signed on in the back, I was planning to get another aid to sign on the back side of the extra line that I added. I just didn't get around to it. So that could be one of his arguments. However, and that's what our girsa is. He actually got more edim to sign falsely on that extra part of the star. On the opposite side, on the back side of the star, where he wrote this extra line, he'll actually find a phony aid to sign on the back, so that he could fill the whole back of the star. Anything that's written should have an aid signed on the back. By having an aid signed on the back side of any line that he adds, that would give it at least a look of validity. And he'll say, I wanted to have a lot of edim on my star. Even though normally the minimum amount required for a get mekusher is 3 edim, I wanted to make sure that there'd be a buzz. I'm not going to just make a regular get mekusher. I'm going to make a get mekusher with a buzz, and we're going to have multiple people signing on, even more than three. Just like we learned in the Mishnah, get kereach hakoel mashlimin alav, and that's talking about a get that has blank spaces. It's not related to our sugi right now. Eze get kereach polkik sharav merubin me'edav. So if he has more folds than edim, you could add edim to it. Avlum edav merubin miksharai shapertum. Miksharai shapertum. You could have extra edim. So at the end of the day, maybe he'll make such an argument and he'll try to validate the star, and there's a potential for fraud. Amr lei, so Reb again answered, Mi savras edim kesurdin chasimi. You're assuming that the edim's signature are in the same direction and are parallel to the signatures to the writing on the star. That's not how it is. Edim mimata l'mayla chasimi. So instead of the edim signing on the back of this line, along this line over here, that's not what they did. They signed this way. So let's say our three lines, 1, 2, 3, is approximately 8 inches, right? It's approximately 8 inches from here to here. They signed from top to bottom, Reuven ben Yaakov 8, and it was an 8-inch line. Or they started here, Reuven ben Yaakov 8, and it was an 8-inch line. Or there are those who learn it's only one line, Reuven ben Yaakov 8, Chai ben Shmuel 8, and David ben Beryl 8. But the signature line spanned across the entire length of the star. If you add an extra line there, you can now sign another 8. It would be clear that this was a forgery. So Zog to Gemara. I'm sorry? What was the crossover?
3 names, right? Going down, right?
So let's have a look over here. You have 3 names going either down, either starting here or starting there, going up. So there could be more room to add, but the problem is if you add to it these names that are signed, won't cover a lower line. So let's say you get another 8 to sign. Where are you gonna put them?
You have 3 8s going down, right?
Right.
Can you not have a 4th going down?
You could, but the problem is you want to add text over here, right? You already used up that part of the star. So Zog to Gemara, mi savers edim kisidron chasimi. Rather, edim mimata l'mayla chasimi, and therefore that will take away that concern. Let's have a look at the Rashbam. Not everybody learns exactly like the Rashbam. Mi savers alibu derabim ba'aba that edim kisidron chasivi mechayre eksav. Who said that's what we hold like? Shemashtar kosav shesi shigama edim chasumim shesi. If the text on the star is 8.5 inches long because we're in what we call there's portrait or landscape. We're in portrait view, right? Landscape is the wide way. So we're in portrait view. The maksav kosav arev shigama edim chasum narev. No, you're assuming that the Tasimus Edim is parallel to the direction of the text of the star. The Schilul Lichtayim B'Tchilas Star Keneged Zuchen Edus Shaya B'Fanenu V'Chulun Zeh Tachazeh. If that's how the signatures were configured, then it's very easy to add another line and to add it in the back. Rather, Elami Lamata Lamayla Chasimi Maschilun Lachtoiv Me'achrav Keneged Shita Achroina Zeh Achar Zeh. The tachas is not here, and that makes a huge difference into what the configuration is. So they would start from the last line up. Zeh means Reuven ben Yosef, and then Chaim ben Shmuel, and then David ben Yehuda, right? So because of that, but there are those who learn it's Reuven ben Yosef right across, David ben Yehuda. So that's why that's the tachas are achazah. V'holchin v'cholfin la'orcho shel star. They're signing across the length of the star. The mashtar kos of erev hein chos mishasi. So their signature direction will be perpendicular to the direction of the text in the star. The chen mefush begemarish eretz Yisrael. I assume that means the Yerushalmi. Get pashit edav l'rachboy u'mekusher edav l'archay. The chivin shemaschin lichtayv keneged shita achroina. Since they're starting their name at the bottom of the last line. You wouldn't be able to add more text. The only part of the text of the star that will validate are texts that are covered underneath or on the other side of where the Edim had signed. But we have another problem. Sometimes, let's say we write a star, and the star says that Reuben borrowed $100,000 from Shimon. So Shimon has this star that says that Reuben owes him $100,000. And the last line was, if Reuven loses 5 pounds by next week, I'm moichel the star, right? That maybe Shimon would want to erase that from the star because that makes a huge difference. It can hurt his star. So Frag the Gemara, Frag was clever problem. Maybe this Tanai was written in the Shida Achroina that if Reuven loses 10 pounds by next week, he's not going to have to pay back. I definitely don't want that in the star because I want to be paid back. The guy is Shita Achroina. He's going to end up, he'll cut off the bottom line of the star. So that won't be in the star. And the guy is Leila Reuven Bahadeh. So now, if the fellow signed Reuven ben Yaakov 8, by cutting off the last line, it might cut off Reuven's name, right? So how would that, why would that be a concern? His name is cut off. That's not a problem. Then umiskasher ben Yaakov. All it will say now on the back is ben Yaakov. And when you write ben Yaakov, that's considered a good chesima. Ditnan ben ish ploni 8 kosher. So Zok Gemara, how do we avoid such a concern? Zok Gemara dechsiv Ruvain ben bechadara the Yaakov 8 iluya. So there are different ways to explain this, but the way we could learn is he would write, let's say he wants to cut off this last line, so he would write Reuven ben in the place of that last line, and then he would write Yaakov 8, which means if he wanted to cut this whole line off, he would not be able to avoid cutting off the word ben as well. Yaakov 8 alone wouldn't be a valid signature. Zok to Gemara, Ditnan ish ploni 8 kosher. I'm sorry. A little bit higher, okay. V'Yaakov 8 iluya. V'leichish doma gayis le Reuven ben. Maybe he cut them both of the words off. Umiskasher b'Yaakov 8, and it would be kosher just with writing Yaakov 8. Ditnan we learned ish ploni 8 v'loiksiv. I'm sorry, ish ploni 8 kosher. Even if you didn't write ben, if you just wrote his name, you can also be machshir star. And if you didn't want the likes of 8, this will only work if he wrote Reuven ben Yaakov and he doesn't write 8 at the end. So therefore, there's no concern that it'll cut off 2 lines and it'll just say Yaakov 8 because you don't write 8 at the end of the stars, and therefore there's no concern that this could happen. Okay, let's have a look at the Rashbam inside. There might be a Tanai there, like if you lose weight in the week, I'm going to be Moichel L'choiv, or it might say that I paid already back some of the money. Hamazik L'balashtar. That would be a line that the Balashtar would love to eliminate. And therefore, if a guy is law, Lahi Shita Achreina, he would cut off that last line. The Avagav, the guy is Leila Reuven Bahadei, even though he's also cutting off Reuven's name when he's cutting off that last line. Hachosim connected me b'chutz. Harei Mishtar Bey Ben Yaakov. At least the text of Ben Yaakov will still be there on the second to the last line and up. Utanan the kosher b'kach, and we know such a chasima is acceptable as an 8. Zok Gemara Ben Ish Ploini 8 kosher. We know that that's kosher. But Achash Mekirin Shezek Sab Yodei Shalosh Ben Ploini. Someone writes Ben David, and we know who he is, and the signature does match. It would be accepted. Mashani the Gemara answered because of a Reuven Ben Bechadar on one row, and therefore if you cut it, this can all go off. B'shur Achas, the guys Leila Reuven, guys Leinami Leben Badei, well Nishar built a Yaakov Levadei. So what the Rishonim talk about is the way I explained it is you write Reuven Ben very small letters in the place of one line. There are those who learn that you write Reuven Ben one under each other. So then it's mamish impossible. And then Tosfos gets into the nitty gritty. Because if you write Reuven Ben, the Ben will be under the Re'u. So maybe you could cut off half the line and you'll just have the Ben of Reuven. Right? If you cut off, so the Tosfos gets into a lot of nitty gritty of different things that could happen. But the Rashbam keeps it a little bit more simpler. And the Gemara says maybe he just has Yaakov 8. That should also be good. So the Gemara the likes of 8. You don't write 8 at the end, and that will avoid a potential for fraud. The Bayisema la'olam the cost of 8. or maybe you did write aid. So now we have a concern. So after Gemara, the only aid you let sign is the Yidinin Ba, the Hachasimas Yoda Lav the Yaakov. You could let him write Reuben ben Yaakov aid. Why aren't we worried that it'll cut off the Reuben ben and it'll just say Yaakov aid? We're not concerned because we know upon the signature that this was Reuben's signature. It wasn't Yaakov's signature. So there's no way that they would ever be able to be Mekayim the star by comparing it to Yaakov's signature, because in fact his signature is not comparable at all to his father's signature. Okay, Vidilma b'shmei davu chasam. Maybe Reuben, out of respect for his father, signed his father's name as his own signature. Zakt Gemara, loishavik in shmei didei v'chasam b'shmei davu. Nobody does. No one does not use his name. Rather, use his father's name. It's not a normal thing to do. That's not something that we need to be concerned about. Frank the Gemara, Vidilma similar ba'almahu. Maybe Yaakov isn't the name that he's signing. It's a symbol that's spelled with the word Yaakov. For instance, the Rav Tzayir Kaver. Rav didn't sign Rav. He used to make a picture of a fish. That was his stamp that he signed with. And Rab Chanina Tzayir Harusa. And Rab Chanina would draw like the branch of a palm tree. Or Rab Chisda would just make a samach. Or Rab Hoshia would just write a ayin. So it's a letter or a diagram that's symbolic of his signature. So maybe the symbol of his signature was Yaakov. Rava bar Rav Huna was Mekusa. Mekusa was the mast of a ship. So these are all things, and the Rashbam actually wants to know why punkt they would have used those things. So let's just see the Rashbam. I'm not sure I understand the Rashbam. Maybe you could help me. Rav Tzayir Kivra, Tzuras Hadag, Hayoisa B'Shtaris. When he signed his name, he just made a picture of a fish, B'Makam Chasim Asai. Ukvar Yadu La'olam, everybody knew Shezo Chasim Asai. It was known that this is how Rav would sign, and therefore Umayul Kachasim Shemai. His diagram would be as valid as if he signed his name. V'amefarish tam amay tzayer kavor v'charusa eino elataya. If anybody has a reason as to why they did it, he would be making a mistake. So don't even try to guess the reason. That's how I understand the Rashbam, unless I'm making a mistake. Then the Rashbam says, the Rashbam goes and does exactly what he said nobody should do. V'shema al shema seyem. Maybe the reason why they use that symbol is because that's what they did for a living. Zeh nog lechel dogim, or because of what they did. He used to eat a lot of fish, so that's why he signed fish. V'zeh nog b'tmorim, and this fellow ate a lot of dates, so he signed with a palm tree. V'simna ba'alma hayoisim. Is that how?
Isn't that easy to?
Don't even guess what it was, and then the Rashbam tells you what it was. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yosy, do you hear me?
Okay, David's talking, but I don't hear him.
Oh,
So let me see if I can fix my audio. Not sure why it's not working. 1 second. Right speaker. I don't have the right speaker connected. So let me just see what we can do. Not this one. Okay, now we can hear you.
oh, okay. Just wanted to say, aren't those symbols easily forged? The whole idea of a signature is that you have a unique signature. You're not printing it, you're signing it, and everyone's signature is unique. A symbol is easily forged, especially simple ones.
I guess they had a unique way of drawing these things. Like I know that if two people sat and drew a picture, there would probably be a difference between. If I told them both to draw a fish, there would probably be a difference in between the two fish that they wrote. So it could be he drew a fish that was somewhat unique. And it said even people knew exactly what his picture looked like.
Right, that's why it's easily forged.
I guess by a professional, you could forge a signature too. I don't think signatures are designed to stop a professional because a professional could probably forge even a signature, like a good picture. But an amateur would probably have a harder time duplicating perfectly a picture, a drawing. But that's a good point. Okay, so Zok Gemara, so maybe Yaakov is just a symbol that Reuven is using to represent his signature. Zok Gemara, lechotzav inish l'shavya l'shmei davua simna. A person wouldn't have the chutzpah to use his father's name as just a simon. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know what the big deal is, but they must have had a higher sensitivity in what respect means. Do you think it's a slight to your father to use his name as your symbol to represent you? But vice it was. Many of our names are just that, right? Shimonovich, you're basically using your father's name as your symbol, as your last name, right? Yakubovich. But the Gemara tells us that it wouldn't have been respectful. Marzutra says, I'm sorry? Right, but it's not respectful to use your father's first name as your symbol, as your stamp, as your coat of armor. So Zok to Gemara, Marzutra Amar, Lama lachulaha, you're driving yourself crazy with all these different arrangements. I have a simple security measure, and this is how the get Mekusher was written, where there would be no concern at all. Because Kol Mekusher, She'ein Eidov Kolon B'shita Achas, Posel. Every Mekusher, all his Eidim have to be on the same line. So what he's being Mechadish over here is, before I was talking, if the 8 signs from here and he heads towards the top of the star, there might be 3 Eidim. This could be Reuven and Yaakov, this could be the third. I'm sorry, there might be one line, Reuven and Yaakov. After that, it will be Shimon and Chaim, and after that, it could be Levi ben David. Zok Marzuta, that's not how it worked. Every one of the 3 Chasimis had to begin at the bottom of the star and at the end at the top of the star. So Reuven ben Yaakov, Shimon ben Chaim. If that's how it was done, and you cut off the bottom line, you didn't just cut off the Reuven from the first 8, you cut off the first name of every 8. Zogt, the Rashbam, which we'll see in a minute, if one person signed Ben Yaakov, okay, he didn't use his first name. But that's an unusual way to do it. To say that the coincidence that all 3 Eidim signed only Ben somebody, that doesn't make any sense at all. And therefore, this is the best security measure. Since they're all of the signatures have to begin at the bottom of the text and end at the top of the text, there's no other way to be Mizayef Dishtar. So that's what Marzutra said. Marzutra said, Lama lach kulahai, kol makusher, she'ein eidov kolom b'shita achas, would be possible anyway, and therefore we don't have any concern at all. Let's see the Shmam inside. Marzutra Amar, Lama lach kalal shnui dechiki. Why are you twisting yourself into a pretzel trying to find the problem? L'Rabbi Yirmi be'Abba hakis firle. The kol shtar makusher, be'edim chasumim mi b'chutz, acharei aksav, lo'arkoi, any type of get mekusher where the Eidim are signing perpendicular to the writing on the star on the back side, but they start their signature at the bottom and they end their signature at the top, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even make a difference if they're starting from the top of the star going down or starting from the bottom of the star going up. The Ein Eidav Kolon B'shita Achas Puzzle. If their names don't start and end on the same line, that star is automatically rejected. So here it's zetachase, not ze'achase. As you remember, they have to sign parallel to each other, one below the other. They all have to end their names they have to use like a word processor justify to make sure that their name takes up the entire length. If they all start at the bottom, or ben shamaschilin lachtoim keneged shita rishona u'mesayim b'shita achrona, or they're starting from top to bottom. Eino yochel loy lahoysef b'soif star. It would be impossible to add anything at the bottom of the star. Shara ein chasimosam keneged hu toisves, because there will be no chasima keneged the extra line, and it would also be impossible v'loy lemegez ulakatzer reyesa the b'soif star. You wouldn't be able to cut a line after the star either. The guy is chad min ha'edim, guy is kulu, because if you're going to cut off one name of one of the Eidim, you're going to cut off all 3 names because they're all on the same plane. Okay, gewaltig. Kasav beperish Rabbeinu Chananel, b'afagav the parker b'yirmiyah koma the akshua, even though Rabbi Yirmiyah defended himself against all of the caches that the potential for fraud exists in his configuration, nevertheless, masnizin krafuna daika that you write Shur V'Kayim. The Ketani of Chediv Gamliel Omer Mekusher Shekos VeEdov Mitoichai Kosher Sheyachal Asosei Poshet. We have a Mishnah that says, our Mishnah says, if you had to get Mekusher that you wrote to Edom on the front face of the star, it could be a kosher star because it would be treated like a get Poshet. But that would be impossible because they signed in the wrong direction. But it would be impossible to make a get mekusher into a get poshet because the signatures would be in the wrong direction. So there's a lot of discussion as to whether or not we write kol shrir v'kayim in our shtaris nowadays and how that would work. Okay, let's just finish off the daf. Zog to Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Referring back to what we said earlier, Kol HaMech Kin Kulan, if you ever have to erase anywhere in the star and make a correction, which we say is legitimate, but you need to certify those corrections, at the end of the star, when you write a kol shrir v'kayim, you have to write v'dein kiyumein. This is correct, the correction that we made. It's almost like what we have where we make our initials, we put our initials where we made a change. And the Rashbam is not Gers V'den Kiyumein. Upirish Kol HaMechkin she'enon b'makom shrir v'kayim darminu la'il d'ksherim. Anytime you made a correction in the star, which we said earlier was valid, Sarach l'kaimon b'soif hashtar l'fnei shrir v'kayim. So right before you write shrir v'kayim, you write on line 6 there was a correction. Shrir v'kayim, it's legitimate. Shim einon mikuyomin, if there is no place that says that those changes, in fact, are valid, then anybody could have went in and changed some of the text of the star. But if it has to say at the bottom before Shrir V'Kayim that these changes are legit, then we could rely on them. That's item number one. No, because anything by a kol shrir v'kayim that's erased is already invalidated. See, that's the only place that's untouchable. V'tzorich sheyachzor mein yonish shel star b'shita achrayna. On the last line of the star, you cannot write anything new, anything that's consequential. Just a little bit of a review of what occurred. My timer. What would be the reasoning for that? The last line we never pay any attention to. And there's a lot of discussion because you could always squeeze in the last line. Let's say, even if the Adam sign close to the text, there's always a little bit of room, someone could squeeze in. So therefore, the last line of a star, we never rely upon. Let's see the Rashbam. In our stars, what does that mean? What does that translate into in our stars? We write the kanina min ploni bar ploni li ploni techoma the kosev mafarish leil. There's a kinyan made to validate whatever is written here in the star. That's really a repeat because the star has already explained what the transaction was. It just repeats what was said before. This is how we would be mafarishit. So it's not that there's a mitzvah to chazer over in the last line of the star. The point is that you have to ignore anything consequential that might be written in the last line of the star. Anything said in the last line that was not already written in the star is to be ignored. As we're going to see tomorrow, there's a good reason why not to rely on the last line. This way, if you wrote a t'nai in the last line, we will be kind of star. We will not give any validity to the t'nai at the bottom. I'm sorry, if you don't do that, and you might be used to like it in. So for Keret, if the Tanai wasn't Mekuyim that was written in the last line, if we gave it validity, it could undo the whole star, and therefore we don't give it any validity and we ignore anything there. You know what you should end the star with information that we don't really need, like just repeating what the star discussed. When we after this way, plum, there'll be no loss in Malay Nilmad Mishita Achroina if we ignore the last line. Shari Kvar Meforish Lamaila Mashakos of Mishita Achroina. Whatever it was written in that last line, we already have earlier in the star, and therefore it can be fully ignored. Okay, we'll stop here.
You want to change something.
You wouldn't be able to because it has to be before Shrir V'Kayim. And that would be obvious that something got stuck in there. Okay, so
There's a big Baltimore too.
there's also a discussion about what Dovi's bringing up, and that is, what about in the margin? So Tosha speaks out, they used to block out the margin, they would scribble in the margin. You know how when we write a check, we put a line across and we go XX, so they did that as well. Yeah, so they did that as well for the margins, like they did make sure to not leave any place in the star where someone would be able to add to. But sometimes they had to leave blank margins, the Tosfos tells us, because if you went to Bezdin to be Mekayim the star, they had to stamp somewhere and sign that it was certified, so there was always a little bit of blank left at the bottom of the star.